Yo, welcome back to the channel, boys and girls. In today's video, as part of my build series where I build up my specialized LA Sprint, we will be tackling the installation job of installing the shifters as well as all of the cables for the brakes and the front and rear derailleur. So let's get started. So inside of each shifter behind the rubber hoods, there is a 5mm bolt that we loosened, which will allow us to slide each shifter up through the drops and onto the top of the handlebars. Ooh, that is tight. So we got the first shifter on. Now let's go ahead and move on to the second one. All right, guys, so a quick change of plans. So these are the prime carbon fiber aero bars that I ordered from a chain reaction. And the problem with these carbon aero bars is, unfortunately, the clamp that holds the shifters in place, they don't go all the way up over here and they kind of get stuck almost halfway. So I don't want to take any chances on crushing the carbon by trying to fit this up all the way up the drops, because I want to be able to mount the shifters so that they can sit flush when I'm resting my hands. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to install these ones instead. These are the alloy version of the aero handlebars here, and I suppose it's probably already a good idea, because if this bike is going to be intended for crit racing, then it makes more sense to use a cheaper set of handlebars just in case I do crash. So let's go ahead and get these off and we'll go ahead and install the alloy version. And now we will install our alloy. Okay, alrighty, so now we can finally go back to installing our shifters. Now, as you guys can see, that was much easier to get on than the carbon version. So much easier. It is a shame that we unfortunately weren't able to fit these on with the shifters. Now, I could have most certainly made it work, but I do like to have my shifters sit flush on top of tops there, right there. And since this bike is going to be used for crit racing, like I mentioned, having it be super duper light is really not that big of a deal. And the weight difference between these and the alloy, it's not that much. But the good news is what I plan to do for my Yolio bike is I plan to make that more of a climbing sort of bike. And so I will hopefully be able to attach these carbon ones to that bike. So now that we have our shifters installed, we can go on to the next step, which is installing all of our cables for the brakes and for both the front and rear derailleurs. Let's continue. Alrighty, guys, so for the brake cables, it's pretty straightforward. What we're gonna do, we've already done it, is we're gonna first peel back the rubber hoods so that we can gain access to the line for us to insert our brake cable. All right, guys, so the next step is installing our brake lines into our shifters. So step one is peeling back the rubber hoods so that we can gain access to the line, which will allow us to insert our brake cable. And this is the end of here. This is the little stop that will stop in place once we get to the end of the line. Same thing for the other side. So on to installing our shift cables here. So it's a similar process to the brake cables. We essentially feed them in here, and at the end of each cable, there is a metal stop that once we feed in, we'll know we've gotten to the end of feeding in the cable lines. Alrighty, so now that we've routed the shifting cables, we started from the top of the shifter body here, and then at the end of the cable line, the metal stop, we inserted and secured it deep within the shifter body. And this aspect is really, really important, because this is what keeps the shifter snug, because without proper tension and without the cable being snug, we're going to end up having bad shifting. And we basically repeat the process on the other side. So let's continue. So next up, for the shifter cables, we have these plastic caps that get inserted right into here, like so. We have that, then we can go back and install our plastic cap. So with this plastic cap now back in place, we repeat the process on the other side. For the cable routing in the handlebars as well as the frame, we will be routing the cables using our Park Tools IR 1.2 cable routing system. And I'll just route Alrighty, and at the end, this is what screws into the outer cable, which allows you to draw kind of like a fishing line, which allows you to draw the cable through using the magnet. So we measured our outer shifter for the rear derailleur. Now we're just going to make our cut so that it can fit nice and clean before we begin to route the inner cables within the bike frame. As they say, measure twice, cut once. All right guys, so here is where we are at. I did a lot of the cable routing off camera. Reason being is because I didn't want to make this video longer than it needed to be, but we measured and cut our outer cables. We have those set up here on our front brakes. We also have the cables routed for our rear brakes as well. So everything has been routed except for the outer cables that goes to the rear derailleur. And the good thing when it comes to Specialized bikes is they provide these cable guides, as you can see right here. So routing the cables internally is not a difficult task at all. Another thing, guys, that we fixed is we fixed the issue with my cranks. Earlier, I noticed that the cranks was not spinning as freely as it should. It turns out I had to reposition the spacers that SRAM provides with the crankset, and I also had to readjust the preload that comes with the cranks on the non-drive side. So I adjusted the preload, correctly installed the spacers where it needed to go. Basically, what the instructions say is you only add a 3mm spacer on the drive side, no spacers on the non-drive side. And this is specific for 68mm dub press fit bottom brackets. So let's continue. All right guys, so all of the cables have now been officially routed from the shifters to the brakes, through the frame, and as well as the front and rear derailleurs. It's really impossible to show you every single aspect of the cable routing, but this should give you a good idea of how this overall process works. Right now, I'm just working on the gearing and the indexing of the rear derailleur. But that about wraps it up for this video, guys. As always, if you have any questions or comments or concerns, please feel free to leave them down below. And I will check you guys on the next build video. Thanks for watching. Peace.